Trust, the most valuable currency of the modern world. It takes years to build it, but just a few lines of fake quotes are enough to destroy it. In the fall of the year 2025, one of the world's most prestigious consulting firms had to make one of the most embarrassing confessions in history. The reports they sold to governments for millions of dollars were based on academic studies that never existed, and it was the skeptical view of a single academic that uncovered this. Deloitte. What comes to mind when you hear this name? Probably prestige, reliability, expertise. Are one of the global consulting giants known as the Big Four, with more than 470,000 employees operating in 150 countries worldwide, a name trusted by everyone from governments to Fortune 500 companies. But in the year 2025, this giant fell into a trap of its own making. And the name of this trap was artificial intelligence. This is not a simple story of a mistake. It is a story of systemic failure, corporate arrogance, and the dark side of the modern consulting industry. 2 countries, 2 reports, millions of dollars, and dozens of fabricated academic sources. Australia, December 2024. The country's Ministry of Employment and Workplace Relations assigned Deloitte for a critical project. The task was to conduct an independent assurance review of the Targeted Compliance Framework. Do you know what this framework was? The automated penalty system regulating social welfare payments for job-seeking Australians. If you did not go to a job interview, if you missed a meeting, the system would automatically cut your payments. Approximately 200,000 Australians faced the threat of this system every 3 months, and there were serious issues with this system. IT errors, legal uncertainties, incorrectly applied penalties. The ministry wanted an independent review to understand the situation and paid Deloitte 439,000 Australian dollars for this. Approximately $290,000 in American dollars. In July 2025, a massive 237-page report was published on the ministry's website. At first, no one noticed anything. The report was read, filed, shelved, until an academic from the University of Sydney noticed something unusual. Dr. Chris Rudge, a researcher in health and social welfare law at the University of Sydney Law School. By profession, he was accustomed to reading such reports. One day, while examining Deloitte's report, a familiar name caught his eye. Professor Lisa Burton Crawford, his own colleague, a professor of public and constitutional law at the University of Sydney. But there was a problem. The book attributed to Crawford in the report did not seem related to her area of expertise at all. Rudge had never heard her mention such a book before. In Rudge's own words, I immediately realized that it was either a hallucination produced by artificial intelligence or the best-kept secret in the world. Because I had never heard of the book, and it sounded ridiculous, the skeptical academics started researching and found more problems as they dug deeper. Not 1, not 2, but about 20 errors. Non-existent academic articles, books that were never written. Alleged studies from Lund University in Sweden, which were never conducted. But the worst was yet to come. As Rudge delved deeper into the report, he discovered something much more serious. Deloitte had quoted a federal court judge. The problem is, this quote was completely fabricated. The judge had never said these words. The court decision was misquoted, and a completely made-up judge's statement was added. Rudge's reaction was harsh. They completely misquoted a court decision. Then they made up a quote from a judge. I thought this was a much bigger issue than the egos of these academics. This is about misreporting the law in a report that the Australian government trusts. That's why I thought it was important to raise my voice about accuracy. Think for a second. The government purchased a report to oversee a system that cuts citizens' social benefits, and this report was based on non-existent legal grounds. Decisions affecting real people's lives were built on fake academic foundations. Matse kakeke, la kerekere.
Roque leaked his findings to the media. In late August 2025, the Australian Financial Review published the news, and it quickly turned into an international scandal.
What did Deloitte do? First, they remained silent. Then they quietly uploaded a revised version of the report to the ministry's website. But Roosh noticed this too, and what he saw shocked him even more. Instead of replacing a fake reference produced as a result of hallucination with a new real reference, they placed 5, 6, 7, or even 8 new references in place of the fake ones. This shows that the original claim in the main body of the report was not based on any source of evidence.
Do you understand? What happened?
While correcting the fake references, Deloitte actually had to fabricate more references. Because the original claims were already fabricated, there was no real source to support them. At the beginning of October 2025, Deloitte finally had to accept the truth. In the methodology section of the revised report, the following admission was included. To fill traceability and documentation gaps, a toolchain based on the Generative Artificial Intelligence Large Language Model Azure OpenAI GPT-4, licensed by the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, was used. Let's put it simply. Deloitte had used Microsoft's ChatGPT-based artificial intelligence, and this artificial intelligence fabricated non-existent academic studies. This is technically called hallucination. The artificial intelligence produces information that appears real, but is completely fake. The irony is this. Deloitte was tasked with examining IT errors in the government's social welfare system and fell victim to the most basic error of its own IT tools while doing so. The scandal shook the Australian Parliament. Politicians made harsh statements. The public sector spokesperson for the Green Party, Senator Barbara Pocock, did not hide her anger.
Deloitte misused artificial intelligence and used it in an extremely inappropriate manner. They misquoted a judge. They used non-existent references. These are the kinds of things that would get a first-year university student into serious trouble. Did you hear? A first-year university student. One of the world's largest consulting firms made mistakes that even a first-year university student wouldn't make and got nearly $300,000 for it.
Labour Party Senator Deborah O'Neill spoke even more harshly.
Deloitte has a human intelligence problem. If it weren't so pathetic, it would be laughable. As our parliamentary inquiries have shown, these consulting firms win contracts by promising their expertise. Then, once the agreement is signed, they provide you with the least costly personnel.
Green Party Senator Penny Allman-Payne also joined the criticism.
This report was supposed to expose the failures in our welfare system and help ensure fair treatment for income support recipients. But instead, the Labour Party is allowing Deloitte to deceive them. They should demand a full refund and stop letting their consultant friends make decisions.
In the first week of October 2025, the Australian government made a statement. Deloitte had agreed to repay the final installment under the contract. Deloitte's statement was brief and concise. The matter was resolved directly with the client. That's all, no apology, no detailed explanation. But the politicians were not satisfied. Senator Pocock was demanding the return of all 440,000 Australian dollars. Ultimately, the entire report had lost its credibility. How could a building built on false foundations be solid?
And now we come to the most ironic part of the story.
On the day the scandal broke, that is, the very day it was announced that Deloitte would refund the Australian government, Deloitte made another announcement. On October 6, 2025, Deloitte announced that it had signed a major partnership agreement with the artificial intelligence company Anthropic. Anthropic's Claude artificial intelligence assistant would be offered to 470,000 Deloitte employees in 150 countries, Anthropic's largest corporate deployment to date. Deloitte's global technology leader Ranjit Bawa announced with enthusiasm.
Deloitte is making this significant investment in Anthropic's artificial intelligence platform because our responsible artificial intelligence approach is very compatible. Together, we can reshape how institutions operate in the next decade.
Wait a second. On the same day, on one hand, they are making a repayment for producing fake reports using artificial intelligence. On the other hand, they are celebrating that they will use more artificial intelligence. This was either an extraordinary case of timing blindness or an incredible example of corporate audacity. TechCrunch summarized the situation as follows. Deloitte's agreement with Anthropic is a referendum on its commitment to artificial intelligence even while grappling with technology, and Deloitte is not alone in this challenge. But the story doesn't end here. Because before the Australia scandal cooled down, another bombshell exploded from the other side of the ocean. Canada, November 2025. The country's easternmost province, Newfoundland and Labrador. A serious health crisis was occurring here. The shortage of nurses and doctors was at its peak. The provincial government wanted a roadmap to solve this crisis and assigned Deloitte for this. Subject: Health Human Resources Plan. A massive report of 526 pages, cost $1,590,848 Canadian dollars, approximately $1,130,000 in American dollars. It was paid in 8 installments from March 2023 to March 2025. In the third week of November 2025, the local independent newspaper, The Independent, published an investigation, and the findings bore eerie similarities to those in Australia. The report contained fake academic citations, non-existent journal articles, fictional studies where researchers who never worked together were shown as co-authors, and real academics being cited in articles they never wrote. This time, real academics spoke up, highlighting the seriousness of the situation. Professor Martha McLeod, a retired academic from the University of Northern British Columbia, Deloitte had cited her in a study on the cost-effectiveness of retaining rural nurses. McLeod's reaction.
The quote is fake and potentially generated by artificial intelligence. Our team definitely conducted nursing research in rural and remote areas, but we never conducted a cost-effectiveness analysis. We never had the financial data to do so.
Professor Gail Tomlin Murphy from the Dalhousie University Faculty of Nursing. It was also quoted in a non-existent article by Deloitte.
I worked with only 3 of the other 6 authors mentioned in the excerpt. We need to be very careful to ensure that the evidence informing the reports is the best evidence, verified evidence. After all, these reports must be accurate and evidence-based, not only because they cost governments, but also because they cost the public.
And perhaps the most striking example is Deloitte. It had referred to an article about the impact of COVID-19 on respiratory therapists. The article was supposedly published in the Canadian Journal of Respiratory Therapy. The Canadian Society of Respiratory Therapists confirmed the situation. This article was not published in the Canadian Journal of Respiratory Therapy. There was no article, it never existed. It was completely fabricated. Deloitte Canada made a statement after 4 days of silence. Deloitte Canada stands firmly behind the recommendations put forward in the report. We are revising the report to make a small number of citation corrections. These do not affect the report's findings. Artificial intelligence was not used to write the report. It was selectively used to support a small number of research citations. This was not just an academic matter. Real people's lives were at stake. Yvette Cuffey, president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Nurses Union, expressed her concerns.
This model shows a lack of proper supervision, quality control, and verification. This cannot continue, because decisions about healthcare personnel should be based on reliable information, not shortcuts. Reliability is important, transparency is important, solid planning is important. The public deserves to be assured that decisions affecting our healthcare system are based on solid information.
And there was something even more concerning. Deloitte was conducting another critical project in the same province, a core staff review. In Cuffy's words,
a company that faced public criticism and shame twice regarding how it used artificial intelligence.
NDP leader Jim Dean spoke even more harshly.
Not only is the use of artificial intelligence in reports to the government disgusting, but it also undermines our trust in the government to do the necessary work to address issues in our healthcare system and indeed across the state.
Newfoundland and Labrador. Premier Tony Vanku addressed the situation. He had just taken office at the end of October and had inherited this scandal.
As far as I know, we are not significantly using artificial intelligence internally, but I will make sure we are not using it. We will examine how the government uses artificial intelligence and ensure it does not get out of control.
Public Employees Union President Jerry Earle wanted concrete steps. Official guidelines for the use of artificial intelligence by consulting firms needed to be developed, and HICMM welcomed this suggestion. Earle's words summarize the situation.
Even if there are only 4 quotes, it undermines confidence in this general document and its recommendations. As with everything, when you create doubt and uncertainty, people start questioning the reliability of these documents.
Deloitte's scandal was not an isolated incident. Artificial intelligence hallucinations had become a global issue by the year 2025. What does artificial intelligence hallucination mean? Large language models generate text by predicting patterns. They do not compare facts with a database. As a result, they can sometimes produce information that is completely fabricated but appears highly convincing. Academic format, proper citation styles, journal names that seem correct. All of these can be fake. This has happened before. In 2023, 2 New York lawyers used ChatGPT in a petition they submitted to the court. Artificial intelligence had produced non-existent case precedents. The judge sanctioned both lawyers and described the incident as a lesson in technological competence. But Deloitte's situation was different. This was not the mistake of an individual lawyer. This was a mistake systematically made in the reports sold for millions of dollars to governments by one of the world's largest consulting firms, and made the same mistake in 2 different countries. This scandal shed light on the broader issues of the consulting industry. Senator O'Neill's criticism targeted the industry's business model.
As our parliamentary investigations have shown, these consulting firms win contracts by promising their expertise. Then, once the agreement is signed, they provide you with the least costly personnel. Deloitte received $290,000 in Australia and $1.13 million in Canada, and instead of conducting real research with this money, they had artificial intelligence do the work. Then they didn't even check the output of the artificial intelligence, or they did but didn't care.
An industry analyst summarized the situation as follows. These consulting companies are investing in developing artificial intelligence tools worth billions of dollars, claiming they will accelerate their audits. But this incident raises the possibility that many other reports may also contain similar hallucinations. In fact, the same week, the Financial Times reported that the United Kingdom's 6 largest accounting firms were not officially monitoring how artificial intelligence affected audit quality, so Deloitte getting caught might have been just the tip of the iceberg.
The most tragic aspect of this story was the identity of the victims. Who were the subjects of the fake report in Australia? Job seekers, welfare recipients, the most vulnerable people in the system, those whose incomes were cut off by automatic penalties, who found it difficult to appeal, and
and whose voices often went unheard. In Canada, a healthcare system suffering from a shortage of nurses and doctors, patients in rural areas unable to receive care, healthcare workers struggling with burnout, and a report that would determine their future was based on false academic foundations. On one side, a billion-dollar global consulting giant. On the other, ordinary people forced to shape their lives according to these reports. The power imbalance couldn't be more obvious. In Australia, Deloitte made a partial refund. The full amount was not even disclosed. In Canada, there has been no news of any refund or compensation yet. The report is still on the government's website. As far as we know, no one has been fired. No one has been disciplined. Deloitte's CEO has not made a single public statement on the matter. Deloitte's defense in both cases was the same. The corrections do not affect the essence and recommendations of the report. It is as if the foundation of a building based on false evidence has been secured. This scandal contains important warnings for the age of artificial intelligence. First, artificial intelligence is not an expert. It can appear convincing, use academic formatting, and write with a confident tone, but it can lie, and detecting those lies requires real expertise. Second, corporate reputation is no guarantee. Deloitte is one of the world's most respected companies, but that respect did not protect them from error. In fact, perhaps the opposite was true. Because no one questioned them, they became less careful. Third, speed can kill quality. Artificial intelligence is used to speed up work, but if accuracy is sacrificed for speed, the result is fake reports and broken trust. And fourth, transparency is essential. Deloitte did not disclose from the outset that it was using artificial intelligence. It confessed after being caught. If they had been transparent from the start, perhaps quality control would have been taken more seriously. The Deloitte scandal is a turning point. 2 countries, 2 reports, the same mistake. A total payment of approximately $2.3 million, dozens of fake academic citations, and policy recommendations affecting millions of people's lives. This is not just Deloitte's problem. It raises questions about what trust means in this age of artificial intelligence. If even one of the world's largest consulting firms fails to properly verify AI outputs, who does? Once trust is broken, rebuilding it takes years. So, has Deloitte learned its lesson? Or is getting ahead in the AI race more important than integrity? History will record 2025 as the year that proved artificial intelligence is both a tool and a weapon. That year, we learned that even the world's most trusted institutions can be wrong. That year, we saw just how difficult it is to truly distinguish fake information. And that year, a single academic's skeptical gaze brought giants to their knees. Dr. Chris Rash became suspicious when he saw his colleague's name. That small doubt uncovered a massive scandal. Sometimes heroes are ordinary people who ask the right questions. What about you? The next time you read a report, see a news story, or hear an expert opinion, will you check the sources?